It's funny how some things never really change, even after like thousands of years.
Right.
Like, we're talking leadership here, and we've got this ancient epic poem, the Iliad, still so relevant to how we work and lead teams today.
Absolutely.
And we're diving into all that with this really fascinating LinkedIn article by Michael Burns.
Yeah.
He really breaks down the leadership lessons you can find just hidden in plain sight in the first book of the Iliad.
It's true, even though it's, ancient Greece, Trojan War, you get into these really human, relatable issues in there.
Oh, yeah.
They still play out in modern workplaces all the time.
Totally.
Especially when it comes to leadership.
For those who maybe haven't thought about the Iliad since college, can you kind of set the scene for us?
Absolutely. So the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War.
Okay.
This 10-year siege. And book one kicks off with this big conflict between Agamemnon, the leader of the Greeks, and Achilles, their star warrior.
Got it.
And the article really focuses on this conflict as a case study in how not to lead.
And Burns doesn't hold back. He actually calls Agamemnon's leadership style toxic.
Right.
So let's unpack that a little bit. What makes him such a bad leader?
Yeah.
It's more than just being a demanding boss, right?
Yeah, it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
So Burns points to this specific event in book one. Agamemnon basically steals Achilles' war prize, a woman named Briseis.
Oh, wow.
This public humiliation. It's all driven by Agamemnon's need to just assert dominance, save face.
Yeah.
And it completely blows up the team dynamic.
Yeah, I could see how that would sting. Having your hard-earned recognition just snatched away.
Right.
Talk about a morale killer.
Exactly. And that's a key point the article makes. Agamemnon is so fixated on his own ego, his own reputation. He disregards the impact of his actions on his team.
Wow.
He creates this culture of fear, resentment.
Yeah.
Which, as you can imagine, not exactly a recipe for winning wars.
Not a good look. It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And Agamemnon is all vinegar.
Right. And the article points out that this kind of leadership creates this ripple effect. Burns highlights some research showing that when people feel disrespected or undervalued, it just breeds distrust.
Interesting.
They're less likely to go the extra mile or collaborate, really work together effectively.
Makes sense.
When you don't feel valued, why would you?
Right? It's like a disease, that lack of trust. So how do we deal with a modern-day Agamemnon? Because let's face it, we've all encountered them in some form or another.
Well, it starts with recognizing the pattern.
Right.
Agamemnon, he's all about control appearances. Threatened by anyone who challenges him, outshines him. So in a modern context, that might look like that boss who takes credit for your ideas.
Oh, yeah.
Or a colleague who undermines you to try to get ahead.
Been there. So how do you deal with that kind of energy-sucking behavior? I mean, short of sailing off to Troy, of course.
Right. Well, Burns talks about setting boundaries, advocating for yourself.
Okay.
And it's not about being aggressive. It's about clearly, calmly communicating your needs, your expectations.
Yeah.
And documenting everything.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a record if you ever need to make your case.
I like that. That's good advice. Don't just stew in resentment. Actually do something about it. But easier said than done sometimes, right? It takes guts to stand up to that kind of personality.
It does. And that's where having a strong support system is so important, both inside and outside of work. Which brings us to another key figure in the Iliad, Achilles.
Right. The warrior who lets his emotions get the best of him. So it's not just Agamemnon's ego that's the problem here, is it?
No, not at all. Achilles' story is like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
About the dangers of unchecked emotions.
Oh, okay.
So when Agamemnon humiliates him, Achilles is consumed by rage.
Yeah.
Withdraws from battle. He's sulking in his tent.
Yeah, boy.
Which, doesn't exactly help the Greek army win.
Not a good look. Not the best team player. Pride and anger. Not a good combination. Like that time I told my boss I thought his big idea would never work. Turns out it worked brilliantly. But I just came across like a total jerk.
It happens.
Yeah.
It's so easy to let our emotions hijack our better judgment, even when we know better.
So true.
And the article points out this is especially true in those high-pressure environments.
Yeah.
When we're stressed, feeling threatened, our emotional brains, they take over.
Yeah, they do. So how do we avoid falling into that Achilles trap? Should we all just be walking around or pressing our emotions at work?
No, not at all. Burns isn't advocating for emotional suppression.
Okay, good.
He emphasizes the importance of what he calls strategic vulnerability.
Okay, I like that. Strategic vulnerability. So you're saying it's okay to acknowledge when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, but it's what we do with those feelings that matters.
Exactly. It's finding that balance between acknowledging your emotions and channeling them constructively.
Okay.
Maybe that's taking a walk to cool down, or venting to a trusted friend or mentor.
Right.
Or even practicing some mindfulness techniques.
Basically, don't let your inner Achilles burn down the whole camp.
Exactly.
Makes sense, but I'm sure it's not always easy to do in the heat of the moment.
It's not.
Okay. So we've got Agamemnon's controlling behavior. We've got Achilles' unchecked rage. What about Nestor? He's supposed to be the wise old man, the voice of reason, right?
He is. And this is where it gets interesting. Because Nestor represents a different kind of leadership pitfall.
Okay.
The well-intentioned but ultimately ineffective advisor. So he sees this conflict brewing between Agamemnon and Achilles. And like any good mediator, he tries to intervene.
Okay.
He appeals to logic reason, urging them to reconcile for the good of the team.
Sounds like a sensible approach, so why doesn't it work?
Because, as Burns points out, Nestor misses a crucial step: empathy.
Oh, interesting.
He's so focused on just finding a logical solution that he fails to address the emotional undercurrent that's really driving this whole conflict.
So it's not enough to just offer practical solutions. You have to address the feelings behind the behavior first.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to comfort a friend who's just had a terrible day.
Okay.
Would you jump straight into problem-solving mode, or would you start by just listening to them vent, acknowledging their feelings?
I know I'd want someone to just hear me out first. Sometimes just feeling heard is more valuable than any solution.
Exactly. And that's where Nestor, with all his good intentions, he just misses the mark. He's coming from a place of logic, and Agamemnon and Achilles are, drowning in emotion.
So how does this ancient leadership drama actually end? Does anyone step up and show us a better way?
Well, the article highlights Thetis Achilles' mother as an example of effective leadership in this situation.
Okay, interesting.
And, Thetis isn't a warrior or a king. She's a mother fiercely devoted to her son. And she sees how much this whole conflict is just tearing him apart.
Okay, so not your traditional leadership role. What does she do differently?
She listens to Achilles' pain and anger without judgment, validates his feelings, even though, she might not agree with his actions. And then she takes action on his behalf, advocating for him to the gods.
Wow, she's like the ultimate ally and advocate. It's a good reminder that leadership isn't always about holding some formal position.
Right.
It's about showing up for the people around us and using whatever influence we have to support them.
Exactly. And Burns points out that having that kind of support network, it's so crucial, especially in those high-stress environments.
Absolutely.
He actually uses the phrase, building your personal board of directors.
I love that.
These are the people you can turn to for advice, encouragement, just a sounding board when you need to process difficult emotions, challenging situations.
Your own personal board of directors who wouldn't want that. So as we wrap up here, what's the key takeaway you hope listeners will walk away with from this deep dive?
The beauty of the Iliad is that it's not some ancient rule book. It's more like a mirror, reflecting these timeless human struggles.
Right.
And by examining the leadership successes and failures in this story, we could learn so much about our own behavior and the dynamics at play within our own teams and workplaces.
It's about recognizing those patterns, right? The ego-driven leader, the emotionally volatile teammate, the well-intentioned but ineffective advisor, and then using that knowledge to handle those situations more effectively.
Exactly. And Burns leaves us with this really powerful question. He asks, are you building the kind of team the Greeks so desperately needed? A team where egos are kept in check, emotions are acknowledged and addressed, and support systems are strong.
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves, no matter what our role is. Are we creating those spaces where people feel valued, heard, empowered to do their best work? It's a high bar, but one worth striving for. The Iliad might be thousands of years old, but as we've discovered today, its lessons on leadership and teamwork are as timely and relevant as ever. This has given me a lot to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.